The night air in Sycamore Springs was crisp, unnaturally still, like the city was holding its breath. Motion sensor lights buzzed to life as two figures in black tactical vests stepped out of the HOA security office, radios crackling on their shoulders. One of them, a tall, square-jawed enforcer named Vince, spun his baton like he was itching for trouble. The other, Marcus, younger and twitchier, cracked his knuckles with anticipation. "He's still there," Vince muttered. "Right by the fountain. Freak's been loitering for hours." "Homeless trash," Marcus sneered, his boots thudding against the sidewalk. "Let's clear the rats." The man they approached didn't move. He sat slumped beneath the marble angel statue in the Sycamore Springs roundabout, wrapped in a worn, oversized coat, frayed boots tucked beneath him, head bowed like he hadn't heard a thing. His skin was weathered, beard grown wild, and a battered canvas backpack rested beside him, one strap torn and stitched back together with twine. Rain had misted the air, coating everything in a soft sheen of silver. Even the angel looked like it might weep. Vince stepped into the light and raised his voice. "Private property. You've got 60 seconds to leave, or you're leaving in cuffs." No response. Marcus clicked his flashlight on and aimed the beam directly into the man's face. "You deaf or dumb, old man?" We said move. The man slowly lifted his head. His eyes, piercing, ice gray, met theirs with a strange calm. He didn't flinch at the light, didn't blink. He didn't look defiant or afraid. He looked tired. But beneath that exhaustion, something shimmered, something ancient. He opened his mouth, voice barely audible. "You're standing on my property." Vince laughed, the sound sharp and mean. "You're what?" Before anyone could answer, Marcus grabbed the man by the coat and yanked him upright. The homeless man stumbled, boots slipping on wet stone. Vince shoved him hard, knocking him to the ground. The man didn't fight back. He simply braced himself, as if he'd done this dance 1,000 times. "What did you say to me?" Marcus snarled. The man tried to stand again. Vince didn't let him. A boot slammed into the man's ribs. He gasped, then coughed, blood spraying across the pavement like paint. "Say it again," Vince growled. "Go on. Say it now." The man just looked at them, eyes distant, expression unreadable. He whispered something, inaudible, but whatever it was made Marcus pause for half a beat. Then he snarled and struck again. A phone camera blinked on from the shadows. Behind the trimmed hedges and stone columns of the gated community, a teenage girl, Layla Torres, watched in horror, phone trembling in her hand as she recorded every brutal second. Her breath caught in her throat as Vince grabbed the man by his collar and lifted him halfway up before slamming him back to the wet pavement. "This is what you get," Vince hissed. "You think you can walk into our neighborhood and pretend to be someone." Sirens didn't come. No backup arrived. The streets were silent except for fists, grunts, and the occasional clink of metal against stone. The man finally crumpled, unmoving, blood seeping into the cracks of the roundabout. The guard stood over him, panting. "Let's go," Marcus muttered, his face pale. "He's not worth the paperwork." They walked off, leaving him in a crumpled heap beneath the weeping angel. But behind them, Layla hit upload. The title she typed in was simple. HOA security just beat this homeless man. Look what happens. By morning, the world would know. And the city would never be the same. The video hit the internet like a lightning strike. By 7:12 a.m., it had been viewed 12,000 times. By 8:30, a local news station picked it up. By 9 o'clock, #Sycamore beating was trending in 3 states. The footage was raw, unflinching. 1 minute and 42 seconds of grainy violence, echoing with the sound of fists and boots. There was no audio editing, no commentary, just reality, cold and ugly. The homeless man didn't scream once. That silence hit harder than any punch. Viewers were furious. Comments flooded in like a tsunami. What kind of monsters beat someone already on the ground? Those guards should be in jail. Period. He said they were standing on his property. What did he mean? But it wasn't just the violence that caught the internet's eye. It was what happened in the freeze frames. At exactly 1:09 in the video, when the man reached for his fallen bag, the camera caught it. A tattered leather tag stitched with gold thread. PKC. The initials shimmered in the rainlight for just half a second, but that was all it took. The Reddit detectives pounced. Within hours, one theory climbed to the top of the pile. That man isn't homeless. He's Prescott Kane Crownwell II. Layla Mendoza was still brushing her teeth when she saw the thread. She spat into the sink, dropped her phone, and scrambled to pull out the worn manila folder that had been collecting dust in her drawer for the past 5 years. The Crownwell file. She'd started it when she was still a rookie reporter chasing conspiracy tips and urban legends. Everyone had laughed. Billionaire turns ghost. Vanishes at the peak of his empire. Too dramatic for real life. Except, she always thought there was something off about how neatly he disappeared. Prescott Kane Crownwell II. The golden child of Eastwood. Real estate wonderkind. Bought half the city's downtown before turning 30. Known for vanishing into black SUVs and making deals no one could trace. 10 years ago, after a scandal involving zoning permits, a collapsed bridge project, and a dead whistleblower, he simply vanished. Presumed dead. Assets liquidated. Estate abandoned. But Layla never deleted the folder. And now she stared at the blurry freeze frame from the video. Heart-hammering. PKC. Same initials. Same city, same strange silence. She threw on a hoodie, grabbed her recorder, and headed out the door. If Crownwell was alive, if he'd been here all along, there was a bigger story unfolding beneath the surface, something massive, and she was going to be the one to break it. Meanwhile, inside the HOA offices of Sycamore Springs, chaos had erupted. Vince and Marcus were suspended, pending internal review. The HOA president, Carol Merriweather, stood behind a podium at a hastily called press conference, her smile brittle and eyes darting like a cornered animal. We deeply regret what happened. This individual was loitering. Security was following protocol. We'll fully cooperate with authorities. Behind her, the fountain where the man had been beaten was cordoned off with yellow caution tape. But people weren't buying the apologies. Not this time. Not when the blood was still in the cracks of the pavement. Residents started whispering. What if the man was someone important? Why hasn't he come forward? And what did he mean by "you're standing on my property"? That line echoed. And far from the media vans and HOA meetings, in a quiet greenhouse covered in ivy and shadows, the man in the coat watched it all unfold from an old flickering tablet. The footage played again and again. The guards, the kicks, his own blood mixing with the rain. But he wasn't angry. He was calculating. It started with a painting, an oil portrait in the Eastwood Public Archives, cracked with age, tucked away in the corner of a gallery most people ignored. It showed a boy, maybe 10 years old, standing stiffly in front of a wrought iron gate. His hair was wild, eyes the color of a thunderstorm, and a strange emblem glowed on the pocket of his blazer, a golden crown with the initials PKC. Layla Mendoza stared at it for a long time. She hadn't planned to visit the archives, but something gnawed at her gut after rewatching the video for the 6th time. That glimmering tag on the man's backpack, those initials, it couldn't be coincidence. And now here she was, face to face with what had to be a younger version of the man in the video. Prescott Kane Crownwell II. The plaque read, painted on the day he became the youngest partner in the Crownwell Trust. Layla took a shaky breath. She opened her laptop and pulled up an old article, one she had saved years ago. Crownwell heir missing amidst scandal. Estate in chaos. The world had all but erased him. No funeral. No press release, just silence. But now, he was back, and he wasn't hiding anymore. Across town, storm clouds crawled across the sky as Layla followed a lead to the old Crownwell greenhouse, a place half swallowed by vines and whispers. Once a gleaming architectural marvel built for charity, now just a forgotten skeleton of steel and glass. As she stepped inside, her breath caught. Nature had taken over. Roots coiled through cracked tiles, sunbeams pierced through shattered panes, and orchids, Prescott's favorite flower, according to her notes, bloomed wildly in the chaos, as if time had frozen just for them. And there, in the center of it all, stood the man himself. Same ragged coat, same gray eyes. Only now he held a watering can, carefully tending to a flower sprouting through concrete. "I knew you'd come," he said without looking up. Layla's voice caught in her throat. You're him. Prescott Crownwell." He turned, face battered, but expression calm. "That name's heavy," he murmured. "I dropped it a long time ago." "Why?" she asked. "Why disappear?" Prescott exhaled slowly, placing the can down. "Power is a drug," he said. "My family hoarded it. Traded in land like poker chips. Turned neighborhoods into profit machines. Somewhere in all that, I forgot how to be a human." He stepped forward, sunlight catching the bruises still healing on his face. "So I walked away," he continued. "Left everything. Wealth, boardrooms, fake friends. I needed to know what the world really looked like without a name. Without gates, without guards." Layla's fingers twitched near her recorder, but she didn't press it. This wasn't an interview. This was a confession. "I've lived in the shadows," he said. "Watched them build towers on stolen land, pave gardens into parking lots, and when I spoke up, they beat me like trash." His eyes flashed. "But they made a mistake. They woke something I buried." Silence fell heavy in the greenhouse. Outside, thunder rumbled, distant but hungry. "You said they were standing on your property," Layla whispered. "Were you being literal?" Prescott cracked a small, cold smile. "Sycamore Springs, and about a third of this city, is still legally tied to Crownwell Trust Holdings. They never closed the books. Never bothered checking the shadows. I may be off the map, but my signature still unlocks vaults." Layla's heart pounded. "What are you going to do?" He looked out the shattered glass ceiling, toward the skyline. "I'm going to take it back." The chessboard was set. The first piece moved at dawn. An executive at Everbright Holdings, Sycamore Springs' shadow landlord, opened his office window to find a single white envelope pinned to the glass with a gold fountain pen. No return address. No stamp. Just a seal. PKC. Inside, a single page. "Reclaiming begins today. You were tenants, not kings." That morning, the HOA's bank accounts froze. Across town, Prescott Kane Crownwell II stepped off the city bus wearing a pressed navy coat, boots shined, and his battered backpack slung over one shoulder. The transformation was subtle, but deliberate. He looked clean, sharp, still quiet, still dangerous. He walked straight through the Sycamore Springs gate like he owned it, because legally he did. Residents stared. Whispers rippled through driveways. Dogs stopped barking. On the other side of the entrance, the marble fountain, the same one where he was beaten, had been polished overnight. The bloodstains were gone, replaced with fresh lilies floating on the water surface. At its base, someone had spray-painted a crown. Prescott's eyes lingered on it only for a second before he continued on. The HOA office building was sealed tight with security glass, but that didn't matter. With a calm tap of a card and a fingerprint scan, the legacy systems still tied to the Crownwell Trust, he walked through the front doors like a ghost returning home. Inside, Carol Merriweather, the smug HOA president, was mid-rant on a phone call when he stepped in. She froze, phone slipping from her fingers. "You," she hissed. "You shouldn't be." "I should be in every square inch of this city," Prescott interrupted coolly, placing a thick folder on her desk. "Deeds, land titles, proof of ownership dating back 3 generations. Carol's face twisted. This is harassment. We'll sue. You'll resign. He cut in. Immediately, along with every corrupt member of your board. Before I make this very public. He opened the folder. Page after page showed internal memos, falsified fines, kickbacks from contractors. Her signature was on most of them. How did you even? She stammered. I never stopped watching, Prescott said, even when you stopped seeing. Security guards started to enter, but one glance at the documents and the press badge on Layla Mendoza, who appeared behind him with a rolling camera, made them freeze. Layla simply mouthed one word to them. Live. Carol collapsed into her seat. By afternoon, Prescott stood at the center of Sycamore Square, surrounded by press, residents, and former guards who now kept their distance. Layla stood just behind him, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. Cameras rolled from every direction. He held up the city charter. This neighborhood was built on the illusion of control, he said. Gated comfort bought with silence and greed. But comfort for the few is not justice for the many. He took a breath, steady but forceful. As of today, the Crownwell Trust reclaims ownership of all land tied to the foundation. Properties, public spaces, utilities, and infrastructure. I am not here to rule. I'm here to rebuild. A murmur surged through the crowd. Someone clapped. Then more. It grew like a wildfire. Prescott raised one hand, silencing them. I was beaten like a stray dog at your gates, he said, voice rising. But a crown doesn't rust just because it's buried in dirt. He dropped the mic, literally, and walked off. And the city, for the first time in a long while, held its breath for what would come next. They called him a myth. Now he stood in daylight. The man who once vanished from Eastwood's skyline was suddenly everywhere. By Monday, the news had exploded nationwide. Homeless man reclaims a city. Cable networks argued whether it was legal, tabloids speculated whether he'd gone mad, and talk shows debated if this was justice or chaos. But on the streets of Sycamore Springs, where tenants had lived under threats of fines for leaving garbage cans out an hour too long, Prescott's name was spoken like gospel. Because for them, it wasn't just a scandal. It was payback. In a crumbling apartment complex on the city's east side, an elderly woman named Ms. Juno wept when her eviction notice was suddenly revoked. Not because of a miracle, but because Prescott had found a loophole buried deep in zoning law that invalidated half the HOAs in Eastwood. He'd written those loopholes years ago, when he was still wearing silk ties and ordering champagne by the crate. Now he used them like knives. In another part of the city, Layla Mendoza followed him through back alleys and broken neighborhoods as he surveyed abandoned properties. He said little, moving with purpose, scribbling notes in a leather-bound book. Everywhere they went, people recognized him, but no one approached with anger, only awe. Whispers trailed behind him like dust. That's the man who owns the city. He used to be rich, and now he's dangerous. He's building something. You feel it. They reached the remains of a burned-down youth center, an old Crownwell-funded project that the city let rot after the scandal. Prescott stood silently before its charred frame, then turned to Layla. I'm not here to be loved, he said. I'm here to remind them the streets have memories, and debts come due. By Wednesday, entire departments were crumbling. The Sycamore Police Department, previously paid under the table by HOA donations, began hemorrhaging leadership as subpoenas rolled in. Bank accounts tied to Crownwell shell corporations started to resurface, unlocked one by Prescott's signatures. Trusts he hadn't touched in 10 years now fueled a war chest. He funded local food drives, paid for lawyers to defend tenants, set up a hotline for residents to report abuse, one staffed 24/7 by former corporate auditors who once worked for him. The old empire was back, but this time it was wearing boots and walking through the mud. But not everyone was celebrating. Inside a penthouse high above the skyline, Brennan Voss, former partner of the Crownwell Trust, and the man who'd orchestrated Prescott's downfall, watched the chaos unfold from behind tinted glass. "He should have stayed underground," Brennan growled. "Now he's lit a fire under the wrong people." His assistant stepped forward nervously. "He's filing claims against Crownwell East and South. If those go through, you lose your entire footprint in the city." Voss's jaw clenched. He turned to the darkened screen behind him. Live security footage from a hidden drone hovering over Prescott's greenhouse. "You want a war, Prescott," he murmured. "Then I'll remind you what power really looks like." Late that night, in the stillness of the greenhouse, Prescott lit a single candle on the cracked marble table once used by his grandfather. He spread out blueprints, maps, and deed papers. Behind him, Layla stood quietly, notebook in hand. "You're playing chess with giants," she whispered. "You think you can win." Prescott didn't look up. "I'm not here to win," he said softly. "I'm here to burn their board." Outside, storm clouds gathered, and somewhere in the shadows, someone was watching. The explosion lit up the night like a second sun. Fire tore through the greenhouse, glass shattering outward in 1,000 flaming shards. The ancient vines ignited in an instant, twisting and curling like serpents made of ash. The air roared with the sound of shattering metal, collapsing beams, and screaming orchids turned to smoke. Prescott had just stepped out. By seconds, from the sidewalk, he turned at the sound, eyes wide as the heat blasted across his coat and threw debris across the pavement like confetti from hell. Layla, just behind him, screamed as a window burst, barely missing her face. And in the flickering light of the inferno, Prescott saw it, spray painted in red across the scorched fence. Udon, tone fire. 6 blocks away, in a quiet, temperature-controlled office, Brennan Voss raised a glass of expensive bourbon and smirked. "You burned symbols," he muttered, watching the flames on a drone feed. "You break spirit. That's how you kill a revolution." His phone buzzed. "They survived," his assistant said quietly. Prescott walked out. "No injuries." Voss's smirk didn't falter. "Then we escalate. Get my fixer. We're going full pressure." The next morning, Prescott sat silently on a bench across from the still smoking remains of the greenhouse. Fire trucks had come and gone. Police had taken statements. No one would talk on record. No suspects. No arrests. Business as usual. Layla crouched next to him. "They tried to kill you." He didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the twisted frame of what had once been a sanctuary, a living memory of his childhood, now nothing more than blackened skeletons. "You going to strike back?" she asked. Prescott finally turned to her, his face expressionless. "No." Layla blinked. "No. I'm going to flood them." That afternoon, Crownwell Trust accounts that had been dormant for over a decade suddenly sprang to life. Millions of dollars, legally untraceable by Voss and his network, were funneled into public infrastructure, housing programs, and legal defense. Lawyers who once worked for Fortune 500 giants now backed Prescott's tenants, evictees, and whistleblowers. And then came the real bombshell. Prescott held a press conference on the steps of City Hall. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing like lightning, the city on edge after the fire. Prescott raised a thick, bound folder before the crowd. "This," he said coldly, "is a full audit of Everbright Holdings, Brennan Voss, and the city officials who've been laundering land rights for the past 15 years. Gasps, shouts. One reporter dropped his mic. "I spent 10 years living among the people these men crushed," Prescott continued. "I've eaten in shelters, slept under bridges, listened to stories no boardroom ever hears. And now..." He opened the folder and handed it directly to a federal agent standing behind him. "I'm done listening." That night, Brennan Voss got a call from his fixer. "They're swarming," the voice said. "IRS, SEC, city fraud units. You're bleeding. You need to disappear." But Brennan wasn't the type to run. He stood at the edge of his penthouse, looking out at a city that once bowed to him. He picked up the phone again. "New plan," he growled. "We don't burn his symbols. We break his ghost." Back in a hidden underground vault beneath Eastwood's oldest bank, Prescott stood before a steel door. He pressed his palm to a scanner. A green light flickered. With a hiss, the vault opened. Layla stepped in beside him, breath-catching. Inside were rows of boxes, blueprints, tapes, proof of everything. Not just land deeds, not just financials, but secrets. Secrets powerful enough to crush empires. Prescott stared down at a weathered envelope labeled simply, "The Fall of the Founders." "I didn't come back just to reclaim land," he whispered. "I came back to end a legacy of rot." The body washed up at dawn, face down in the canal near Eastwood's industrial district. No ID, no shoes, but Layla recognized the man the moment she saw the photo in the police file. Jacob Reyes, one of the former security guards who'd beaten Prescott at the gate. He'd vanished a week earlier, right after agreeing to testify in exchange for whistleblower protection. Now he was floating. Prescott stood at the morgue window in silence. Behind the glass, Jacob's sheet-covered body lay cold under fluorescent lights. "He wanted out," Layla said, voice tight. "He was scared, said they were watching him." "This isn't a coincidence." "No," Prescott murmured. "It's a message." He turned, eyes hard. "They're telling me to back down, but they've made their final mistake." He reached into his coat and pulled out the Fall of the Founders envelope. Layla's hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside, photos, letters, and blueprints. Century-old correspondence between city officials, early Cromwell family members, and land moguls. Proof of illegal land grabs, forced displacements, and a secret syndicate that had built Eastwood's elite on blood-soaked foundations. But the crown jewel was a signed confession from Prescott's own grandfather, sealed in a notarized will. "We buried the original settlements beneath Sycamore Springs, bulldozed entire communities for profit. We made ghosts, and we built over their bones. My hair must either uphold the silence or expose it." Prescott stared at the page like it was fire. Back at the Cromwell vault, the war room lit up. Giant screens showed maps of hidden city tunnels, buried utility blueprints, and sealed real estate records never made public. Prescott moved like a man possessed, connecting dots, laying out routes, identifying what was built over what, and who profited from it. "Every major HOA neighborhood in Eastwood," he said, stabbing a red marker onto the screen, "was built over raised communities. Entire districts wiped out of the record." Layla's eyes widened. "This isn't just corruption. It's a cover-up." "No," Prescott said darkly. "It's a legacy." That night, Brennan Voss made his most brutal move yet. A press leak. Dozens of news outlets suddenly received forged documents implying that Prescott had orchestrated the Cromwell scandals himself, embezzling funds, faking homelessness, staging the comeback for revenge. Fake mugshots, doctored financials, old footage twisted into damning narratives. By midnight, hashtags were trending. Hashtag Prescott Thecon. Hashtag Fake Messiah. Hashtag Cromwell Scam. Layla kicked over a chair in frustration. "He's turning the story on its head, making you the villain." Prescott stood in the shadows, calm, focused. "Good," he said. Layla froze. "Good?" Prescott turned slowly. "If he's panicking enough to fake evidence," he said, "he knows I'm close. He's bleeding, which means it's time to end this." He walked over to a locked steel case beneath the war table. With a click, it opened. Inside was an ancient skeleton key and a leather-bound book titled Eastwood, The Hidden Lines. "Tomorrow," Prescott said, "we go beneath the city." Hours later, deep underground, Prescott and Layla descended a forgotten maintenance tunnel with flashlights. The walls were covered in mold, old graffiti, and historical markers long since erased from the surface. At the tunnel's end stood a rusted iron gate. The emblem above it, a golden crown, not painted, carved in stone. Prescott raised the key and fitted into the lock. Click. The gate creaked open, revealing a sealed chamber of documents, records, bones, and names. The past had been buried, but not anymore. The earth trembled. The moment Prescott unlocked the final chamber beneath the city, the hidden truth was unleashed. Not just the old secrets of Eastwood, but the power that had been buried beneath layers of lies. The bones, the records, the names, every ounce of the city's forgotten history, all spilled out in front of him like a gory relic, evidence of corruption, genocide, and the systematic erasure of entire communities. "This is it," Layla whispered, her voice shaking. "Everything we've been chasing. All in one place." Prescott stared at the dusty old ledger, the golden crown carved into the cover. Every page was a map, a financial transaction, and a name that should never have been forgotten. And then a single line jumped out. "The Cromwell family is the final custodian of Eastwood's soul. Our blood runs through this city, and nothing will erase it, not even the law." Prescott's jaw clenched. His family had been the architect of the city's suffering, weaving themselves into every fabric of power until no one could tell where the city ended and the Cromwell name began. Back above ground, the city was on fire, not in flames, but in words. A single message, pushed by anonymous leaks and encrypted emails, was spreading like wildfire. Cromwell secrets exposed. The truth about Sycamore Springs. The city council was in chaos. The mayor had been dragged into a meeting, his face pale and sweating. Investors from Everbright were scrambling to withdraw billions of dollars from accounts frozen under federal investigation. The press were like wolves, digging deeper and deeper into every corner of the city's foundation. At a high-rise overlooking downtown Eastwood, Brennan Voss clenched his fists, watching the news unfold. "You thought you could erase us," he seethed. "You thought you could control this. I control it now." But as he turned away from the screens, the door to his office slammed open. Layla entered first, followed by Prescott. "You've lost," Prescott said quietly, his voice like ice. Voss turned, a scowl on his face. "Not yet. You think you've won because of a couple documents, a few old men's mistakes. I will bury you before you even blink." Prescott didn't flinch. "You've been burying people your whole life, Voss. But you forgot one thing. I'm still standing. And the people you stepped on are still here too." Outside, the protests were growing. People who had once been scared to speak now took to the streets, holding up their own copies of the Cromwell secrets. Old records, photographs, letters. They flooded every corner of Sycamore Springs, demanding the truth, the land, the accountability that had been denied for generations. The banks were collapsing, the city government scrambling for answers, and beneath it all, Prescott stood tall. He wasn't just fighting for retribution anymore. He was fighting for an entire city's future. At the city center, Prescott called one last press conference. The streets were filled with people, more than ever before. The broken, the forgotten, the fighters, and the dreamers. Cameras flashed. Reporters waited in anticipation. "We've reached the end of this story," Prescott began, his voice cutting through the noise. "The Cromwell Trust built its empire on the backs of those it crushed. The city's future was stolen in broad daylight. But today that all ends. We reclaim what was stolen." He raised the ledger high, the weight of the truth in his hand. No longer will the city belong to the few. No longer will it serve the corrupt. Eastwood is for everyone. The Cromwell family will no longer control this land. The people will. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. As the sun set over Sycamore Springs, Prescott stood at the edge of a park, the very place where it had all started, where his family's reign had begun. He looked out over the skyline, the towering buildings, the newly formed protests, the people demanding change. He wasn't a king, not anymore, but he didn't need to be. The city had finally chosen its future. And for the first time in years, Prescott Kane Crownwell II felt free.